And joining us today in our book talk segment, and has written a very interesting book of the space age. This is called the Interstellar Age, inside the 40-year Voyager mission. And we're joined today by Jim Bell. He's a professor in the School of Earth and Space Exploration at Arizona State University. And Jim, good to talk with you. How are you today?
Good. Good morning. Great to be on the show, Doug.
I'm one of those folks that was fortunate enough to be born at a time where I could watch at least most of the Apollos, and then later on with the Voyager mission. So this was a special interest to me. I guess we're probably around the same age, so it's a fascinating study, isn't it?
Yeah, and I grew up as a kid watching these guys drive cars on the moon, and listening to watching Carl Sagan's original Cosmos show back at a time when there wasn't much science on TV. These things had a profound effect on a lot of us.
Really did. People of a certain age now probably don't even know we went to the moon, which is kind of sad. But that was truly must-see TV, particularly when Apollo 11 landed. But I remember going back to Apollo 8 when around Christmas time. I remember Frank Borman and Lovell. They did some broadcasts around Christmas time. It was very interesting.
Right, including the first beautiful images of Earth rising above the surface of the moon.
Yeah, and you get some of those great pictures in the book, but this is particularly about the Voyager satellite that was launched 40 years ago. I remember that. They talked a little bit about it in school at that time, and I remember some of the initial pictures that came back, but it's still sending pictures back, isn't it?
Well, not pictures, but other kinds of measurements, magnetic fields and particles, all that. There's nothing to photograph. They've gone way past the farthest of our planets in the solar system, and the power levels are dropping, so there's not enough power to run the camera anymore. But there is enough power to measure the strength of the magnetic field and cosmic rays out there, and it's the first time we've sent anything out into interstellar space, so it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I guess the original intent was to go to Mars first, I guess Jupiter, and then Saturn after that, and I guess it kept going. But I guess the initial pictures were from Mars, right, if I remember right?
The initial pictures were from Jupiter. Jupiter was the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, there was another mission around the same time called Viking.
That's the one.
The Mars mission.
Right.
Yeah, both starting with V, and both launched in the 70s. But in '77, when the two Voyagers were launched, we didn't know a lot about the outer solar system, about the giant planets out there, and we could see them in telescopes as kind of fuzzy blobs, and the moons around them were just dots. Didn't know what they were like. So the goal of the mission was to get up close, pass by, slingshot from one to the next, and get pictures and other information on what those places are like, and that turned out to be incredibly successful.
When you look back, not only with the moon missions, the technology that was basically invented to make that work, the technology in the Voyager is amazing. The ship itself was designed to almost fix problems on its own, right?
Yeah, it was the first time that people had built spacecraft with sort of smart software that could recognize problems and report them quickly. It was one of the first examples of a reprogrammable computer in spaceships like this. And this is, we take it for granted today. You run one program, you run another one, etc. But back in the day, it was a big deal to be able to reprogram, and that turned out to be incredibly powerful when problems occurred or when the environment turned out to be different than expected.
Basically, you had to invent how that was done, right? There was no Windows or anything at that point, right?
Exactly. And, by today's standards, they're very primitive computers. There's more computing power in the key fob that unlocks your car than there is on the Voyagers. But despite that, they were cutting edge for the day, and they were able to get the job done.
I know you talk about it in the book as well. I guess there's an old-fashioned tape recorder or cassette recorder that recorded images from the Voyager. Am I right about that?
Yeah, 8-track.
8-track, that's it. Yeah, nobody knows
what
that is anymore.
I know. But, sometimes they couldn't communicate with the Earth because they were behind a planet, and so you needed some way to store pictures and other data, and so that was the technology of the day, right? You probably had a car in the 70s, it had an 8-track player, right? And that was the technology of the day, and that 8-track tape player, both of them are still working well on both spacecraft.
I thought it was fascinating, too. I know Going back to landing on the moon, there was the plaque and everything on the lunar landing module in case there was other worlds that would see it. But on this ship, the Voyager, there's a record on there. I thought that was an interesting story how you talked about what they decided to put on that record.
Yeah, it's kind of like a message in a bottle. This was the idea from Carl Sagan and a couple of other folks to put a message on the spacecraft, a time capsule, if you will, that includes, and it's an old school phonograph, an LP record, and it's inside of a case, and the case has a needle and instructions on how to play it, and encoded into the record is sort of some greatest hits music from Earth, all cultures of the Earth, greetings from world leaders and children, and some photographs encoded onto the record as well of people and our technology, and sort of a snapshot of what life and culture was like on our planet in the mid-1970s.
Chuck Berry's Johnny Be Good is the song on there, right?
Johnny Be Good is representing rock and roll as a kind of musical style, and a lot of people wanted the Beatles on there, and the Beatles wanted to be on there,
right?
But the Beatles lawyers got in the way, as they often do.
It happened quite a bit on Earth.
Still happens. Yes.
Well, Chuck Berry's a bit out there, so I guess he's happy to be out in space, right?
Chuck Berry had a great representative of early rock and roll, pioneering, foundational rock and roll. Yeah.
But so far, nobody's that we know of has found the record. It's still
flying.
No,
and it's really honestly unlikely that anyone or anything will. They'll be traveling, not going to any stars. They're not going to encounter any other planets. They'll be kind of lonely, drifting out there for tens, hundreds of millions of years. Honestly, it might be us. We might be the people that go out there, or our distant descendants when we become interstellar travelers might be the ones to go out there, find the records, and very carefully pluck them and put them into museums.
Well, that was actually, I don't know if you remember the original Star Trek movie, that was part of the plot line. Remember?
Indeed it was.
Voyager, it was called in there, but
That's
they said
right.
It was actually Voyager coming back to, something got messed up with the computer. It became evil.
Yeah, when good robots go bad, absolutely.
And the Voyager has gone, I know you talk about it in the book, but it's gone out to where Pluto, Neptune and Pluto and Uranus, those planets. Pluto, I guess, at one time was a planet. I don't know if it's become a planet again, but the first pictures you've ever seen of that orbital sphere, right?
So
close up,
Pluto,
I'm talking about.
Yeah, Voyagers weren't able to go to Pluto, but there's another mission called New Horizons that's going to Pluto this summer. So July 14th, we'll get our first look at Pluto from another mission. But they could have gone to Pluto with Voyager and opted instead. They had to choose between Pluto and Saturn's large moon Titan, which has a thick atmosphere and is sort of a model for what the early Earth might be like. And at the time, the scientists thought that Titan was a better bet and did some great science there, and then we'll get Pluto this summer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
and
that.
And I do think it's a planet, and I'm kind of a little weird that way among my astronomy colleagues, but I tend to judge a place not based on where it is, but on what it is and what it's like inside. And Pluto is big enough to have turned itself into a sphere, and maybe it's divided into a core and a mantle and a crust. It's got an atmosphere. It's got 5 moons. It's probably had a really interesting geologic history. Anywhere like that, and there's like 30 or 40 places like that in our solar system. I think those are all planets.
Yeah, we were taught it was Pluto when I was in school, so I'm sticking with it too.
That's right. But we were also taught that the solar system ends at Pluto, right? We didn't know that there's all these other options out there, and that's part of what Voyager's helping us to understand as well.
Fascinating book, and great pictures in it as well, great information. It's called The Interstellar Age, Inside the 40-Year Voyager Mission. We've been talking with Jim Bell today. Jim, you want to give out a website? People can get a hold of the book or contact you?
If you go on to Google or your favorite web browser and you type The Interstellar Age, it'll take you to the publisher's website or a site like Amazon. We can learn a lot more about it and order the book that way.
Great. We'll also have a place when we podcast it as well. People can order it. But, Jim, pleasure to talk to you. Great to chat a little about the space program. Always fun to do that. And thanks for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Doug.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles Media.